What if no one could read this sentence? Not just you? Everyone. No doctors, no engineers, no inventors. Because no one on Earth has an IQ above 70. No one understands electricity, medicine, or how a phone works. Hospitals become useless buildings. Airplanes rot on runways. The internet dies without anyone noticing. And when something breaks, it stays broken forever. You can't fix what no one understands. You can't rebuild what no one remembers. This isn't just a dumber world. It's a world where civilization forgets how to exist. So what happens when the minds that built the modern world suddenly can't comprehend it? Now imagine a future where almost every human is born with an IQ below 70. That's not just a drop in intelligence, it's a free fall. The average person can't read a full sentence. They struggle to understand instructions. Cause and effect feel like guessing games. No one knows how to build a car. No one remembers what an algorithm is. The very concept of science becomes a distant echo, something whispered but never understood. This isn't about judgment or superiority, it's about function. IQ measures one critical thing: how well you can think through a problem. And in this world, no one can. We aren't talking about an apocalypse that wiped out technology. We're talking about a collapse that started from the inside. The human mind no longer able to process the world it created. Complexity becomes the enemy. Books become meaningless. Mathematics dies. The world doesn't explode. It simply forgets how to live. And the first to vanish is everything we built. Because when intelligence disappears, technology is the first casualty. It begins in silence. Not a bang, not a blackout. Just a slow unraveling, one unnoticed system at a time. The internet doesn't crash dramatically. It simply stops getting repaired. Fiber optic cables get cut in construction zones and never replaced. Servers overheat and no one knows why. Power surges fry local nodes, and there's no one left to troubleshoot. No one panics because no one understands what's going wrong. To them, the internet might as well be a ghost. Mysterious, invisible, unfixable, and that's just the beginning. The electrical grid gone within weeks. Substations fail. Power lines spark. Transformers burst into flame. But instead of emergency teams mobilizing, the world watches in confusion. Wires are tangled metal. Switches are magic. There are no blueprints because no one can read them. There are no solutions because no one can think through a problem with more than 2 steps. Soon, everything built on electricity dies. Water pumps stop delivering clean water. Grocery store refrigeration fails. Traffic lights go dark. Phones become lifeless bricks. Technology doesn't explode. It fades like a forgotten dream. Planes sit at gates, never flying again. Without pilots, mechanics, or air traffic control, the sky goes still. Cars eventually run out of gas, and when they break down, they stay broken. Roads crack. Highways erode. Bridges collapse and are never repaired. Factories once symbols of industrial triumph are now metal carcasses. No one understands the machines. No one remembers how assembly lines worked. Production halts. Distribution halts. Everything halts. And when the trucks stop coming, the shelves go empty. There are no farmers using GPS-guided harvesters. No warehouses running inventory systems. No logistics managers. No backup plans. The world that once operated on precision, programming, and predictive data is now running purely on instinct. Even basic things become unsolvable puzzles. How do you fix a light switch when the concept of current is foreign? How do you navigate when you can't read a map or even know what a map is? How do you replace a battery when you don't understand what it does? In this world, humans might still hold on to old devices like sacred relics. Phones, remotes, broken tablets, not because they know how to use them, but because they remember they used to mean something. Like cargo cults worshipping abandoned radios, people might mimic tech rituals without purpose. Holding up a dead phone to the sky, pushing random buttons, waiting for the miracle that never comes. And without access to digital memory, without the ability to record or rebuild anything complex, everything humanity once knew is erased. Electricity, computers, engines, communications, spaceflight, medicine, all lost in one generation. And the most chilling part, there's no one left to teach. Even if old schematics survived, no one could read them. Even if a genius were born, they would be alone, unable to convey their thoughts in a world that can't grasp them. Civilization didn't burn. It sank into a simpler, slower, dimmer world. But even without machines, people still need to eat. So what does survival look like in a world too slow for science? With technology gone, the human body becomes the only remaining tool. No tractors, no GPS, no supply chains. Just hands in dirt. Agriculture, once mechanized, optimized, and globalized, reverts to its most primitive form. The plow, too complex to repair. Irrigation, unthinkable. Genetically modified crops, a forgotten miracle. The only food people have is what they can see, touch, and pull from the earth. And here's the problem: most people don't know how. In our current world, only about 1 to 2% of the population works in agriculture. Now imagine the opposite. Everyone is forced to farm, but almost no one understands how to do it. They try. Seeds are tossed into the soil without spacing. Fields are overwatered or left bone dry. Crops are harvested too early or too late. Soils are exhausted after one cycle because no one remembers how to rotate crops, use compost, or manage pests. Livestock fares no better. Feeding and breeding animals becomes a dangerous guessing game. Cows are underfed. Chickens overheat. Diseases sweep through barns that were never cleaned because the concept of bacteria doesn't exist anymore. People remember animals equals food, but not the hundreds of steps between birth and bacon. Eventually, small groups stumble into routines. They figure out, through painful trial and error, how to grow root vegetables or trap animals. Communities settle into tiny agrarian clusters. But there's no long-term planning, no innovation, no scaling. Food is seasonal. Spoilage is rampant. And famine is a constant, familiar threat. There's no such thing as a supermarket. No global shipping containers, no exotic fruits or frozen meats. Everything is local. Everything is slow. And everything depends on the weather. Starvation is no longer a tragedy. It's an expectation. Children grow up never tasting sugar. No rice, no pasta, no chocolate. Just tubers, berries, maybe a boiled egg if they're lucky. Trade exists, but in its simplest form. One potato for a handful of beans. One chicken for a woven mat. Barter replaces currency because no one understands math well enough to create or manage money systems. And without math, there are no prices, no measurements, no budgeting, only gut feelings and gestures. Money itself becomes a relic of a more mysterious world, like language etched into coins no one can read. Cities, once engines of culture and commerce, become ghostly ruins. Steel towers stand hollow. Paved roads crumble. Gas stations are looted for tools that no one knows how to use. People drift outward into fertile lands. They form camps near rivers and forests, chasing the basics. Food, shelter, water. Life becomes hyper-localized. The radius of your world shrinks to how far you can walk in a day. And every step of survival must be done without instruction, because no one writes, no one teaches, no one records anything. Each generation starts over, and over, and over. Societies no longer progress forward. They loop endlessly in circles of survival and loss. Even fire becomes sacred, not as a tool of industry, but as a fragile miracle. Something you guard, not make. If it goes out, you might freeze to death because no one remembers how to make a spark. And with no knowledge, no innovation, and no upward mobility, the world becomes flat. There are no careers, no schools, no ambitions beyond staying alive. It's not a post-apocalyptic wasteland. It's a quiet regression to something older, slower, smaller. Humanity has returned to the fields, but without the wisdom that once pulled us out of them. But even if you can plant food and stay warm, what happens when your body fails you? In a world without intelligence, medicine becomes a death sentence. When a child gets a fever, they shiver, sweat, and cry. In today's world, it's likely a quick fix with a thermometer, an antibiotic, or a visit to the clinic. But in a world without modern medicine, there are no thermometers, no understanding of germs, and no one remembers what a fever even means. The only response is confusion, and a fever becomes a curse, a punishment, or something you're just unlucky to catch. There are no doctors, no nurses, and no word for infection, just death. Modern medicine is not possible without intelligence. Think about what it takes to run a healthcare system, like reading prescriptions, understanding anatomy, measuring dosages, recognizing symptoms, and following multi-step procedures. Now imagine a world where no one can complete a two-step process, let alone learn new ones. Hospitals become empty shells. Operating rooms gather dust, and X-ray machines are ignored, scavenged, or feared. Microscopes become strange glass toys, and stethoscopes become decorations. Syringes are misused or discarded, and pills are taken at random or all at once. Some communities might crush medications into food without any clue what they do, while others may believe the pills themselves cause the sickness. The consequences are brutal. A simple cut can kill. A stomach bug can wipe out a village, and childbirth is a high-risk gamble every time. Old superstitions return, and people might blame spirits, bad air, or curses. Shamans and healers emerge, not out of malice, but desperation. Waving herbs, chanting, or making offerings to unseen forces. It's all they know. Diseases that were once eradicated, like measles, smallpox, and polio, could resurface. But no one would even know their names. Vaccines are gone, as there are no labs, no cold storage, and no concept of immune systems or viruses. The world has no defenses left. Dentistry also disappears, and a toothache becomes a torment without solution. Rot sets in, infections follow, and people die from what we now treat in 30 minutes. Mental health doesn't exist, and anxiety, depression, and trauma vanish. What remains are behaviors no one can explain. People who cry all day, rock back and forth, scream at nothing, or wander off alone aren't understood. They're feared, or worse, cast out. The elderly suffers especially, with no eyeglasses, no hearing aids, and no memory care. The aging population fades quietly, misunderstood and untreated. And then there's childbirth. In today's world, giving birth in a hospital is routine. But in this world, it's one of the most dangerous things a woman can do. There is no prenatal care, no fetal monitoring, no antibiotics, no C-sections, no sterile tools, and no trained midwives. Birth becomes a coin toss with death on both sides, and infant mortality skyrockets. Many babies don't survive their first week. The ones who do often grow up malnourished, unvaccinated, and unprotected from even the mildest pathogens. And because no one remembers genetics, hygiene, or biology, there's no way to understand how illness spreads. Entire communities get sick from shared wells, spoiled food, or infected wounds, and they never figure out why. They just call it fate, bad luck, or worse, they blame each other. Medicine doesn't just disappear, it reverses. The human race slips back into the age where every health problem is either divine punishment or black magic. The worst part is that even when someone survives, they rarely learn from it, because survival doesn't come from reasoning or knowledge anymore. It comes from chance. And if you survive, you're too cognitively limited to pass anything meaningful on. There's no documentation, no medical journals, and no memory. Pain becomes a part of life, and death becomes ordinary, not dramatic, just common. So the world doesn't scream. it shrinks, and the miracle of medicine, centuries of human effort, is erased like chalk in the rain. But people still live, and wherever people exist, there's power. So how does a world without reason decide who leads? In the absence of intelligence, structure still forms, but it isn't guided by laws, constitutions, or critical thought. It's ruled by instinct, and instinct has one language: power. Without the ability to debate, calculate, or plan, leadership defaults to the most primal selector: who's the strongest? Who can take what they want and hold it? Forget politics, diplomacy, or negotiations. This is a world ruled by dominance. The smartest man in the village may be the one who remembers how to tie knots, and he becomes the thinker. But even he answers to someone bigger, louder, and more physically imposing. Hierarchy is tribal and forms based on immediate, observable traits like physical strength, size, confidence, and repetition of behaviors that others imitate. Leaders aren't elected. They emerge through force or charisma and rule not with ideas, but with presence. Imagine a society where the chief is whoever can fight off challengers, where rules aren't written or explained, but barked and reinforced with threats. The strongest man with a stick makes the decisions simply because no one can stop him. There's no long-term planning, no governance models, no taxation, and no legal systems. Only crude systems of reward and punishment. You do what the leader says, or you get hurt. Justice, too, regresses with no trials, no juries, and no burden of proof. If you're caught stealing, the group might beat you, exile you, or worse. Everything is judged by immediate perception. If it looks wrong, it is wrong. If someone yells loudest, they must be right. Disputes are settled through brute force, not logic. The concept of rights doesn't exist because it requires abstraction, and abstraction is gone. Even relationships are simplified. Marriage becomes more about possession than partnership. Courtship is primal, and consent is confused, ignored, or misinterpreted. Jealousy is met with violence. Without literacy, there are no contracts or recorded agreements. Everything depends on memory, and in this world, memory is shallow. Religion returns, but not in a philosophical form. Instead, it becomes tribal and ritualistic, with symbols, chants, and offerings done without understanding, passed down because they seem to work. Gods are feared, not worshipped. Lightning is punishment, illness is a curse, and eclipses are omens. Each tribe may have a spiritual leader, but they aren't scholars. They're often the best performers. Those who can chant loudly, move dramatically, or create impressive illusions with fire and shadow. In this society, impression is everything. Even language becomes a tool of power. Whoever can speak the most clearly and remembers the most words becomes a sort of intellectual elite. Even if their vocabulary is only 200 words wide, they're seen as magical, wise, and dangerous. They might become advisors to the strong, feared by the weak, or manipulated by others to maintain order. But power is volatile. When intelligence is low, fear runs high, and fear breeds paranoia. Leaders are often challenged, overthrown, or cast out for imagined betrayals or bad luck. Without complex reasoning, people link unrelated events. If someone dies in their sleep, maybe the leader cursed them. If the crops fail, maybe it's punishment for a broken ritual. Punishment follows accusation, not evidence. And because no one writes history, the past is constantly rewritten through rumor. Each retelling of an event becomes shorter, simpler, and more distorted. Stories lose nuance, legends replace facts, and culture freezes. There's no national identity or global unity, only tribes, each reinventing its rules every generation. Children grow up mimicking the strongest adults they see. Violence is learned, cooperation is temporary, and society becomes a looping performance of survival and dominance. This is not society as we know it. This is instinctual order, a hierarchy not of minds, but of muscle. And when the strong die young or are challenged, chaos returns. There is no fallback plan, no vice president, and no voting system, just collapse and reshuffling. And yet, despite the madness, people find comfort in patterns. Simplicity becomes safety. Structure, however crude, offers stability. And so these cycles continue, generation after generation. Not because they work, but because they're the only systems this world can manage. But what happens when even the words to explain leadership vanish? In a world without reading, writing, or abstraction, how do people communicate at all? Language is more than just talking. It's memory, knowledge, and the transmission of everything we know from one generation to the next. But in a world where almost no one has an IQ above 70, language collapses. Conversations are stripped to the bone, with most people only understanding and speaking in short, basic sentences. Words like go, eat, fire, hurt, and mine dominate. While complex phrases like cause and effect or responsibility don't exist because they are too abstract. There is no poetry, no metaphor, and no persuasion. Just direct, literal speech that often fails. Misunderstandings are constant, and a missed word can cause panic, while a confused instruction can lead to injury or death. Over time, spoken language itself begins to shrink. Words are lost, grammar decays, and regional dialects fracture into isolated pockets of crude expression. One valley may speak in gestures. A nearby tribe may grunt to indicate objects or emotions. And others might chant repetitive sounds with only local meaning. Eventually, full conversations become rare, and communication becomes more animalistic. Pointing, grunting, repeating single words, and making sounds to imitate actions or feelings. You don't say, "I'm angry because you took my food." You scream, slap, push your plate away, and bare your teeth. Without a common language, cooperation breaks down. Even basic teamwork becomes difficult, as instructions can't be given, plans can't be made, and group decisions often devolve into mimicry or aggression. But the real casualty is writing. In our current world, writing is the bedrock of civilization, recording laws, history, science, literature, and philosophy. Now, that entire system is gone. No one can read road signs, labels, warnings, recipes, or even names. Books become meaningless objects, their pages used for fire, wrapping food, or left to rot. The knowledge of thousands of years is gone. Even numbers fade, with counting stopping at 1, 2, or many. There is no addition, no subtraction, no time telling, and no measurement. Calendars vanish, and clocks are just circles on walls. And without numbers or writing, there is no memory. A story from yesterday becomes twisted within a week. A lesson learned becomes forgotten within a month. A generation is born, grows up, and dies with no record they ever existed. There are no birth certificates, no family trees, no journals, and no funeral rites with meaning. The past dissolves. Each community becomes a closed system, reinventing basic survival techniques from scratch every few years. They may draw shapes in the dirt or scratch images into wood or stone, but these aren't true language. They are symbols, limited, context-specific, and easily lost. Storytelling survives, but it regresses. There are no heroes, no moral arcs, and no layered narratives. Just repetitive myths like fire bad, tree food, man strong, and sky boom, people high. And without language to question or explore, creativity dies too. There are no new ideas because there's no way to explain them. There's no invention because no one can describe how anything works. There's no abstract thinking because the words to think abstractly are missing. Imagine having a thought but not the vocabulary to explain it. Imagine watching someone die and being unable to tell others why it happened. Imagine having a fear, a hope, or a dream, and no way to share it. That's the world we've created, one where humanity can still scream, still laugh, and still grunt, but cannot connect. This isn't just inconvenient, it's catastrophic. Because without language, we can't teach. And without teaching, we can't evolve. Civilization isn't built on stone. It's built on sentences, on shared meaning, on the ability to say, "This is what I know. Please learn it." But here, in this world, that bridge is broken, and the people standing on either side can only wave at each other in silence. So if communication breaks and intelligence is lost, what becomes of creativity, progress, and the human spirit itself? There was a time when humans painted galaxies on ceilings, composed symphonies that moved hearts, wrote novels that spanned thousands of pages and emotions, and sculpted gods from marble and ideas from air. Now, a stick drawing in the dirt is the peak of human expression. With IQs below 70, creativity doesn't disappear entirely. But it becomes something small, instinctual, and repetitive. Children might hum tunes, but they can't write them down. A group may decorate a cave wall with handprints, not to tell a story, but just because it feels good to mark something. Patterns might emerge in woven grass or painted faces, but not with meaning, just repetition. Art becomes less about communication and more about comfort, something to pass time, to touch, to copy. There is no symbolism, no interpretation, and no evolution. And stories, forget it. A typical story in this world sounds like man walk, man fall, rock hurt, man angry, rock bad. That's it. No lesson, no subtext, just raw, literal events. Without abstract thought, imagination dies quietly. There are no what-ifs, no dreams of flying, and no questions about stars or atoms. Religion, too, becomes hollow. Rituals continue, but their meanings dissolve. People burn herbs or chant nonsense, not because they believe in something deeper, but because someone once did it, and it felt important. Even music, the most emotional art form, regresses. In a world without pattern recognition, rhythm becomes inconsistent. Songs are just loud noises. Drumming replaces melody. Singing becomes shouting in groups, off-key and out of sync. Instruments go silent, not because people don't want to play, but because they no longer know how. Without literacy, there are no lyrics. Without memory, there are no verses. Without math, there is no beat. What's left is noise, raw and unfiltered, often joyful, but directionless. Innovation, the engine that once rocketed us into the modern age, stalls permanently. No one asks questions like, what if we built it this way instead? Can we make it faster? Or why does this happen? Because even if someone did wonder, they lack the words, concepts, or tools to investigate it. There is no experimentation, no hypothesizing, and no prototyping. Fire is a mystery. The wheel is a marvel. A sharpened stick is the height of human engineering. And that's the ceiling forever. There are no Edisons here, no Da Vincis, no Einsteins. Even if a child is born with slightly above-average intelligence, they're alone. No one to mentor them, no vocabulary to unlock their thoughts, and no audience to understand their dreams. Their potential withers in silence. And if they act too differently, too strangely, they might be shunned, or worse, eliminated. Because difference in a low IQ world equals danger. Without the ability to understand unusual communities, see genius as insanity, witchcraft, or possession. And so, what little spark might remain is snuffed out. Without innovation, there's no growth, no future cities, no digital revolutions, and no great leap forward. Humanity enters a permanent stall. Civilization no longer marches forward. It circles itself, a loop of survival, reproduction, and death. Even the concept of tomorrow is hazy. People live moment to moment. Planning is reduced to instinct. I'm hungry, I find food. I'm cold, I find shelter. You took my thing. I hurt you. That's it. No long-term goals, no community projects, no personal development. And in this kind of world, hope itself changes. People don't hope to become artists, leaders, or scientists. They hope for a dry place to sleep, for one more meal, and for no one to steal their things or hurt them today. The horizon gets closer, the stars get dimmer, and the sky stays the same. There are no dreams of other planets, no quests for meaning, and no internal debates about right and wrong. Just routine, repetition, and reaction. The human spirit, once bursting with curiosity and vision, becomes static. Not dead, just quiet. And yet, despite all of this, humanity doesn't go extinct. So what kind of long-term future awaits a species trapped in the shallow end of consciousness? Centuries pass, but time doesn't build anything. It just collects dust. In a world where IQs remain under 74 generations, the future becomes a flat plain. No towers rise, no maps expand, and no new frontiers are crossed. Humanity doesn't die out. It just stops climbing. The planet becomes a patchwork of small, isolated tribes, each slightly different. Using different gestures, eating different plants, and decorating their bodies with shells or charcoal. But the differences never evolve into complexity, because no one remembers enough to build on what came before. Life expectancy is short, maybe 30 or 35 years on average, with most people dying from infection, injury, childbirth, or starvation. With no knowledge being passed down, each child starts at zero. Every generation must relearn the same painful lessons: how to make fire, how to avoid poisonous berries, and how to trap small animals. Progress resets constantly because the minds trying to carry it forward can't hold on to it. Culture becomes static, with no music evolution, no new tools, and no new rituals. Just the same simple songs, the same cave symbols, and the same survival myths repeated endlessly. Genetically, the consequences run deep. With higher intelligence no longer a survival advantage, and in some cases even seen as a threat. Natural selection begins favoring conformity and simplicity. The genetic diversity of human intelligence shrinks, and outliers become even rarer. Society, already intolerant of anything different, quietly prunes away the few sparks that do emerge. If someone is born with slightly better memory or reasoning, they may be ostracized. Their insights may scare others or be mistaken for madness. They may die early, alone and misunderstood, and their genes die with them. Over time, the human brain stabilizes at its lower setting. A biological safety mode, capable of eating, reproducing, and recognizing faces, but little else. The worst part is that no one knows anything has been lost. There are no museums filled with forgotten artifacts, no ancient texts to decode, and no warnings scratched into stone. Civilizations peak, everything from the pyramids to space stations, vanishes like a castle drawn in sand, washed away by a slow, rising tide of unknowing. Eventually, even ruins lose their meaning. A future tribe might stumble across a crumbling skyscraper and see it as a sacred mountain. A highway might be called Sky Snake. A rusted satellite dish becomes a thunder god's ear. Myth replaces memory. The Earth resets into a permanent prehistoric loop, except without the capacity to ever leave it again. So, is that it? Not necessarily, because evolution doesn't sleep. Over hundreds of thousands of years, mutations continue quietly and randomly. Maybe one day a child is born with a slightly higher IQ than the rest. Not 150, not even 100, just 80. Enough to notice patterns. Enough to ask why, enough to imagine something more. But without books, mentors, or structured knowledge, even this small upgrade is nearly useless. They can't explain themselves, and they can't teach others. Their drawings are misunderstood. Their attempts at logic sound like nonsense. Their efforts are met with fear or violence. Still, every few centuries another one is born, and another, and another. Eventually, one of them survives long enough to gather others. Maybe they find a few who can almost understand. Maybe they teach by repetition, by rhythm, by symbols. A seed is planted, and if the surrounding tribe tolerates them long enough, that seed might grow. Not fast, not in decades, but over millennia. A crude form of writing returns, a simple counting system, a basic spoken language that builds beyond grunts. It might take 10,000 years to reach where we were in the year 1800, another 5,000 to rediscover electricity, another 1,000 after that to understand the stars again. But it's possible because evolution never stops. And somewhere buried in the genome, the spark is still there. The human species might crawl back to where it once stood. But the question is, will it recognize itself when it gets there? And what stories will it tell about the gods who once lit the sky with fire, flew through the air, and spoke in 1,000 tongues? They won't know it was us because we never left a note. So what does this all teach us about intelligence, survival, and the terrifying fragility of the mind? We often imagine the end of civilization as something explosive, a war, a meteor, a climate disaster. But what if it wasn't fire or flood? What if it was forgetting, not instantly, but so slowly that no one even noticed? Not because we were wiped out, but because we stopped knowing how to be us. This world, where almost every human has an IQ below 70, shows us something chilling. Our intelligence isn't guaranteed. It's not permanent. It's not indestructible. It's a fragile byproduct of billions of tiny mutations shaped by time and chance. And all it takes is one shift, genetic, environmental, biological, for the whole system to unravel. Strip away intelligence and everything else collapses with it. Hospitals, governments, art, language, love, even. What's left is survival, instinct, reaction, a heartbeat without a thought behind it. And the scariest part, you wouldn't even know what was lost. You'd still laugh, still cry, still hold hands. But you'd never build a bridge, never write a book, and never reach for the stars. Because the spark, the thing that made us more than animals, would be gone. So the next time you look at a smartphone, or read a map, or solve a puzzle, remember, you're participating in a miracle. A miracle so delicate it could disappear without a sound. If this world made you think, if it made you appreciate your own mind, hit the like button. Subscribe and share this video with someone who still believes intelligence is something we should never take for granted. And let us know in the comments, what's the first thing you'd teach if you were the only person left who could still understand it?